Dr. Terror's House of Horrors was released in 1965 and is the first of several horror anthologies to be made by Amicus Productions between 1965 and 1974, I believe. That's an approximation. That's when they were released anyway. And this one concerns a group of, well, concerns 5 men who were board a train carriage, the same train carriage, and then they're joined by a mysterious 6th person who turns out to be Dr. Schreck, played by Peter Cushing. Oh, by the way, Dr. Schreck, it transpires later on, is German for terror, or that's a close approximation to it, hence part of the name of the movie. But eventually it emerges, becomes clear to the other passengers that Dr. Terror has a deck of tarot cards, and they all become curious. So Dr. Schreck, I'll call him, because it sounds, Dr. Terror sounds fucking duffy. So Dr. Schreck engages them in conversation in regards to the tarots and explains that all people have like something like a split destiny or a twin destiny. It can go either way. Maybe in the tarot cards, the tarot cards divine that. I think, as far as I know, from what I remember. Oh, he calls this deck of tarot cards his House of Horrors, hence the name of the film, Dr. Terror's House of Horrors. Because from the title alone, it's fuck all to it's set on a train. There's no house involved. Well, not in the the framework of it. So the one guy says, "Oh, will you read my fortune?" So Dr. Schreck, he says, tap the card 3 times after he's shuffled them, and then he starts to read this guy's fortune, and that's where we enter our first story. This one concerns an architect called Jim Dawson, who's played by Neil McCallum, and he's requested to travel to the Hebrides to do some work on a house which used to belong to his family, was in his family for like centuries, but which he had to sell at some point when he was younger. And so the current owner is a woman by the name of Mrs. Biddulp, and she's living there to get over the death of her husband. So it's called the widow Biddulp. Yeah. And like I said, she gets Jim Dawson to come to the house in the Hebrides under the pretense of doing some renovation work on there. And as soon as he gets to this house, it becomes fairly apparent that all is not as it should be, maybe. There's some strange things going on. He begins to hear howls at night. And then he finds, eventually he finds a coffin in the cellar, or a tomb if you like. And it turns out it's the coffin of some bloke called Cosmo Valdemar. Now Cosmo Valdemar was apparently, according to legend, an ancient enemy of Jim Dawson's family, his ancestors, and claimed that that house was stolen off of him by Jim Dawson's family. And also legend had it that he was a werewolf. So this gets Jim Dawson's arse hairs tingling a bit. And in the meantime, he does keep getting some oddball looks from the daughter of the gardener, because there's 3 people in that house: the gardener, the daughter, and Mrs. Biddulp. But then the daughter gets killed. It turns out she was kind of like a red herring. I should mention, part of the legend was Cosmo Valdemar would return to and kill the present owner of the house, and take it back at some point in wolf form or whatever. So Jim Dawson character, he becomes convinced that Mrs. Biddulp's up for the chop. So he makes some silver bullets. He melts down a silver crucifix, which was one of his family heirlooms, and melts it down and makes silver bullets, because apparently it's that fucking simple. And so he's waiting outside the coffin of Cosmo Valdemar, hopefully for him to come out in wolf form so he can kill him. But then he hears a scream from Mrs. Biddulph in the living room. So he runs up there and he sees a wolf. So he shoots all his silver bullets at it and does nothing. The wolf just like jumps past him, fucks off. And he's like, well, what the fuck happened? I thought silver bullets could kill a werewolf. And then Mrs. Biddulph says,
"You mean these?"
And we also see that Mrs. Biddulph's hands have changed. They've grown like claws on them a bit. And her hair's gone all kind of black and rattish. And her eyebrows are kicking off something.
You see, what the legend really says is that Cosmo Valdemar will resume human shape again when he's replaced in his coffin not by the owner of the house, but by a descendant of the man who killed him. Now, any dutiful wife would do anything to bring her husband back to life, even after 200 years.
That's where the screen picture dissolves back to the train carriage. That's the end of this story. So he's like, what, that's going to happen to me? And then he asks Dr. Shrek to send the final card, and the final card, with each reading that the Doctor performs in this, is death. So how can you avoid that fate? It's by dying, apparently. Anyway, next guy to have his fortune told is a character called Bill Rogers, played by Alan Freeman, who I always was familiar with as a DJ. You know, I never knew he did any acting apart from this. He might not have, for all I know. But yeah, like I said, Alan Freeman plays Bill Rogers, and his story sees him returning home from holiday with his family, only to find he's got a mysterious new plant or vine growing up side of his house. And they're saying, well, that wasn't there when we left. So get curious about it. He tries to snip it down, but it seems to like be able to defend itself. This plant knocks the shears out of his hands, and the hoe won't do anything when he tries to dig into it. It turns out this plant appears to have a mind of its own and or is aware, and so it's actively defending itself. So it has some kind of intelligence. So, kind of disturbed by this, Bill Rogers goes to the Ministry of Defence. Hang on. I'm not sure if he works there. I'm assuming he must at least know him on a, you know, if not a personal and professional basis, because you can't just walk into the Ministry of Defence on matters of horticulture, I'm pretty sure. Sorry. Okay, so where was I? Bill Rogers, he visits the Ministry of Defence, where he knows a couple of people there. Like I said, I don't know if he works there, or he's just got a couple of friends there. But these two scientists whom he seeks advice from are played by Bernard Lee and Jeremy Kemp. Bernard Lee, of course, was M in the original M in the Bond movies. I'm not sure how many times he played M. I think it were. I don't know if it was all the times up until before Judi Dench took over with Pierce Brosnan. He was in a bunch of them. He was in like the Sean Connery ones, and I'm sure he was in some of the Roger Moore ones. Yeah, he played M quite a few times. So the other guy, the other scientist, he says, "Oh, can I stay at your house for a couple of nights just so I can do a full assessment of this plant, see what's going on?" So the Bill character says, "Yeah, sure." And then next we see the scientist guy's there. He's in his room studying the fucking papers he's got or whatnot, and the guy, Bill's daughter, is playing outside with the dog, and she gets called in for dinner. So she throws the ball to the dog, and it lands near the vine, the big plant. So the dog starts digging at it, you know, as dogs do, and the fucking plant kills the dog. Does it off screen? I don't know. I'm assuming it chokes it out or whatever. So yeah, that happens. You would have thought he'd have got his wife and kid away from the house at that point, but he don't. Things just carry on. They're still researching the plant, and the plant goes on to kill the scientist guy as well. He's there doing his research and such, and it comes up behind him, strangles him. It's a pretty brutal as well. You know, the sound of it's like. So they get Bernard Lee round to their house. After he gets there, the vine then starts to wrap itself around the entire house and traps them all in there. Bernard Lee's flummoxed, so he decides to have a smoke. He's lighting his pipe and he's stood near the window, and he sees that when he strikes the match to light the pipe, the leaves back off, and he's like, aha, they're afraid of fire, of course. So he uses that way to escape. Again he says,
there's one thing which every intelligent thing is afraid of: fire. If a species ever develops that isn't, it could be the end of the world.
Yeah, it's not going to be the end of the fucking world straight off, sure. I mean, you know, just because it's afraid of fire, or just because it's not afraid of fire, doesn't mean it can't be hurt by fire, you know. Plus there's, you know, there's toxins, there's bombs, there's all kinds of weaponry that you can fight a plant with. I'm pretty sure. Anyway, he lights a newspaper, uses it to escape, get to his car, fucks off. Then we come to like the last shot of the story, the last bit of the story, and it shows the burning newspaper that Bernard Lee left. It shows the plants putting it out, suggesting, oh, it's overcome its fear of fire, or it's found out how to, you know, put the fire out. But like I said, it was a burning newspaper. It wasn't like it wasn't a napalm striker out. I'm sure that could sort it out. But anyway, that's where that story ends. Okay, so the next one up to have his fortune told is a character called Biff Bailey, played by Roy Castle. And his story begins, you know, he starts having his cards read, and it begins, he's playing, well, he's a jazz trumpeter, and it shows him just rehearsing with his band, and his agent comes and he says, oh, I've got you a gig in the West Indies. He's like, oh, fucking great, okay. And so they go to the West Indies. While there, is made aware that voodoo's really big on this island, and you know, you don't fuck about with it or take the piss out of it. So he becomes kind of curious about it, and he sneaks off and watches this voodoo dance ceremony, or this voodoo ceremony, and he likes the music that he's hearing during the ceremony. So he takes out some paper, draws a stave on it, and starts writing the music down, writing the notes out. While he's doing this, these natives, like these voodoo dudes, appear before him systematically, one by one, and then he gets hoisted up in front of the head voodoo bloke, who's got a really big reverb effect on his voice.
You wrote down the sacred music of the great god Damballa.
And he gets told to don't nick the music of the great god Damballa. This voodoo god they're worshipping is called Damballa, apparently. And it says, the voodoo guy says to Roy Castle, if you do nick this music, or if you do fuck about with it, Damballa will find you wherever you are, and he will take revenge. So, you know, don't fuck with Damballa. And then he let him go. That's fair enough. But the arrogant little wanker that he is, he don't pay no attention to that warning. Like his other mates there are saying, look, don't fuck about with this voodoo stuff, man. It's, you know, it's dangerous. And he's like, what can happen to me? So he flies back to London, and he develops a new routine centered around this voodoo number he heard. So he does like a jazz fucking fusion piece with it. And so they're playing this jazz voodoo piece in the club, and while they're playing it, the club gets besieged by this like huge wind, like the wind of Damballa. It fucks the club up, everyone leaves. But Roy Castle's still not convinced that there's anything connecting him pilfering the music to any of this weird stuff that's happening. At least not yet, anyway. And so he's buggering off home, but he's a little bit cautious by now. He's kind of like, seems a bit on edge, a bit paranoid. But he gets home, and he's just fucking about with his sheets of music and stuff. I think then he like hears a noise, and he's like, and he sees it's nothing. Then he turns back round. He sees this big fuck off. I don't know if it's meant to be the actual goddamn Bala coming at him. But it's just this big tribesman dude with a painted face walks up to him, approaches him. He towers over him. I think that's just the way he angled the camera to make it look like that. But no, it just like holds his hands up towards Roy Castle, and Roy Castle faints, from what I can tell. So yeah, he faints, and then this we'll call him Dambala dude, he just picks up the sheets of music and then walks off with him, walks back out the door and disappears or something. But that's where that story ends. So that's more the comedic part of the film. That's the comedy story, because throughout it all, like, Roy Castle's just been, he's just like arsing about, and he's a bit of a prick character. Biff Bailey, fucking Biff Bailey. But yeah, that's what happens to him, and his response to that, back in the train carriage.
That'll teach me not to steal tunes.
But anyway, the next one up to have his fortune told is character Franklin Marsh, played by Christopher Lee, late great Christopher Lee. And this Franklin Marsh character has been a cynic about the whole tarot thing throughout the entire film so far. Each time they've had the fortunes ready, he's been saying, "Don't get fooled in by this nonsense, for fuck's sake." So Peter Cushing, Dr. Shrek, says, "Well, why don't you have your fortune read then?" And so Christopher Lee says, "Fine, okay." And so this is where Christopher Lee's story begins. Like I said, he's called Franklin Marsh, and he's a very pompous, stuck-up art critic. And his story begins in an art gallery owned by an artist called Eric Landau. Eric Landau, is it? Landau, yeah. Who's played by Michael Gough, who's done a bunch of stuff, but he played Alfred in the Tim Burton Batman films and a couple of the ones that came after. But yeah, like I said, he's in there, and he always shits on this guy's work, Christopher Lee. He always craps on it. Not literally, don't literally take a shit on it, but he's always criticising it in a very poor light. So yeah, to cut a long story, well, to cut a short story even shorter, he makes Christopher Lee look like a right prick in front of the admiring little crowd he's got in the gallery. And so after this, Michael Gough character Eric Landau starts to kind of stalk Christopher Lee, reminding him how much of a cunt he made him look. So he stalks him at an official gathering. Then he's just following him at various other galleries and such. Yeah, so he's stalking him a bit, rubbing it in. And it gets to the point where Christopher Lee gets so pissed off with him that he decides to wait outside for him, and then he comes out of his gallery one night and Christopher Lee runs him over. It doesn't kill him though, but it does damage him to the point where he has his hand amputated, Eric Landau, and it's his painting hand. So he's totally devastated when he wakes up and he finds this out, and it's kind of heartbreaking. He ends up killing himself because it's destroyed his soul. He might as well have ripped his fucking heart out. An artist who can't create his art no more. And it's like there's one scene where it shows him looking at his pictures through the window of his old gallery, or his gallery, and he's crying because he can't paint anymore. And then he goes on, he kills himself, shoots himself, and at the point he does kill himself, the hand that he lost, it appears on the back seat of Christopher Lee's car while he's driving. It's just the hand, just a disembodied hand. Then it proceeds to attack him while he's driving, and he's like, understandably he's shitting bricks a bit, so he grabs the hand and throws it out the car window, makes it home, and of course he's shaken up, so he starts to make a fire, but unbeknownst to him, the hand has followed him back home still, got out of the water, followed him home anyway, and crept him through the door, and it grabs onto his ankle while he's poking the fire, so he's having a bit of a scuffle with it. He grabs it and throws it onto the fire, and burns it up a bit. Then it shows him at work the next day. And then it shows the burnt hand come through the window, and once again it attacks him. It grabs his neck, and he has another scuffle with it. And this time he stabs it with a letter opener, but then he also puts in a box, ties a box up with string, and throws the box in the river. He was taking no chances. So he thinks he's got rid of it once and for all, this disembodied hand. And he's driving home again, and all of a sudden the hand jumps on the windscreen of his car, and it causes him to crash from like the shock. And then it's the next morning, and Christopher Lee's being pulled out of the wreckage of his car.
Is he hurt bad?
He'll live.
Yeah. But he'll be blind for the rest of his life, poor guy. Still, there's lots of things a blind man can do.
And it's a very karmic end to this episode, you know. He took away the artist's ability to create, so the artist's hand took away his ability to criticise or to look at art, to appreciate art. So it destroyed him as well. Anyway, that's where that story ends, and Christopher Lee's kind of shook up by this. I think he's starting to believe the tarots now. Anyway, then we come on to the final story, and the final guy to have his tarot read. And this guy is a doctor. What's his fucking name? Dr. Summit. I'll just have a check. Dr. Bob Carroll, played by Donald Sutherland. He comes back to America with his newlywed French bride, and at one point he cuts his finger while he's opening a tin of beans or something. Upon seeing the blood on his finger, his wife kind of reacts, I don't know, a bit lustfully on seeing it, which it's fucking obvious what's going to happen. And then Donald Sutherland introduces his new wife to his medical partner, Dr. Blake, played by Max Adrian, and she takes an instant dislike to this guy for some reason. So then it shows them looking at one of their patients as a young boy.
When did he get these?
Just a few days ago, the day he complained he was feeling weak.
And they find 2 puncture wounds on his neck.
What do you think? I don't know. If these were medieval times, I'd almost say he was the victim of a vampire.
It turns out that Donald Sutherland's new wife is a vampire, of course. I mean, it shows her turning into a bat, and then fucking off out the window, then coming home in the morning. And she takes an interest in knowing where Dr. Blake is on a night time, because she senses he's getting close to finding her out. Then she turns into a bat and attacks Dr. Blake in his little laboratory. But because he holds his arms up in the shape of a cross, it makes the bat fuck off. And so he tells Donald Sutherland,
Nicole is my wife.
You know what a vampire is? It's a spirit that takes up residence in a human body, conferring upon it the power to turn into a bat at night, so that it can glut itself on the blood of innocent victims.
He says, look, your wife's a vampire, you're going to have to kill her. Donald Sutherland don't take a lot of convincing either, I mean, but you don't need to, I mean, it's a bit heartbreaking as well, because he says, while she's sleeping, he says to her, I love you, kisses her, then poof, gives it to her. And then it shows the next morning the police are there, and Donald Sutherland's saying, look, she was a vampire.
A vampire?
But it's true.
I never heard anything so crazy in my life.
Look, Dr. Blake will confirm it when he gets here.
Confirm what?
That my wife was a vampire.
Well, that's nonsense. There are no such things as vampires.
So they take Donald Sutherland off with the police.
Can we give you a lift, Doctor?
No, no, thanks. I'll walk.
Okay.
This town isn't big enough for 2 doctors. Or 2 vampires.
Fuck's that. I thought that was a nice twist as well to that story. This twist end, you know, he's getting rid of the competition on 2 sides of his life, you know, personal and business. But anyway, yeah, that's the end of that story, and we're taken again back to the train carriage.
We are all together in this carriage, and none of us has a future.
It's this train. It's gonna crash.
What are you doing?
We're going to pull the communication
Don't be
cord.
such a fool. It's the one where you might cause an accident. Sit down.
We can't all just sit here and wait.
Why have you done this? What do you want? Who are you?
If you're not gazed.
Peter Cushing's gone. Dr. Shrek's gone. It's just his tarot cards have been left on his seat where he was sat.
What's going down? Is it Bradley? Can you see a sign? No.
Well, where else could it be? We've reached the end of our journey. No accidents. So much for Dr. Terror.
They all think they've made it to Bradley, so they come off the train, and you see the station now. It's deserted. They turn back round and the train's gone. The train's disappeared, and they're like, what the fuck? Then a newspaper clipping blows past them.
Dr. Shrek.
Turns out he is Death, the Grim Reaper, and he boarded that train because it was destined to crash, and he was there to gather them at some point. So yeah, and that's where the film ends. It's just him he takes them off to wherever the afterlife or whatnot. I'm assuming the whole tarot reading was saying, well, this would have happened to you anyway if you'd not have died on the train, so don't worry too much about it. Even though Death was just fucking with them for a giggle, maybe to ease their passage. I don't fucking know, but I thought it was a great, framework story, or as it's called, a wraparound. The one that encases all the other shorter stories. So, Dr. Terror's House of Horrors was my introduction to the Amicus anthologies. I remember I saw it when I was a kid. I was just flicking through TV channels and happened on it. I can't remember whereabouts. I think it was... I'm pretty sure the first story had already finished. But I think it was when we were on the train before the second story started, and just watching it for a bit, and I was captivated by it, and I didn't know what it was called, what the name of it was at the time, or anything about the other horror anthologies. And for years after that, I didn't know what it was called. I didn't see it again until I bought an Amicus DVD collection. Some 10 years later or something, even longer than that. I mean, I was aware of the other horror anthologies by then, but I only saw like bits and bobs of them. I never managed to catch a full one most of the time. I've got them all now, due to the magic of the internet. You can find out and acquire lots of shit, lots of stuff. And so yeah, back to Dr. Terror's House of Horrors. Like I said, I love the Amicus anthology. It's some of my favourite horror films, and this was the one that turned me on to him. I mean, it's not as scary. It's not as scary or as kind of grisly as the later ones. The later ones are my favourites, but this did lay the template for all the future Amicus anthologies. And it's not terrifying. It's not like, you know, it's fairly bloodless, but it's got what is so lacking today in you know, horror or supernatural type films for the most part. It's got atmosphere, presence. It's eerie, and I love that that style of storytelling as well. You know, the you know, the stories within a story, the setting on a train, just on a train carriage, like it's ominous, it's claustrophobic, it's engaging. That's my phone. Sorry about that. It's engaging, and I was just drawn in, and the acting is par excellence. You know, Christopher Lee is in his element, playing like a stuck-up character like Franklin Marsh. You know, he's perfect for that character. Peter Cushing, you know, it's probably the first and only time I've seen him do a character like Dr. Shrek. I mean, I've not seen everything he's done, but yeah, with the, you know, the beard and the eyebrows that won't quit. And he's got a character. He's not menacing. He's sinister, but in a friendly way. And he's very good at that. Donald Sutherland, he's fine, you know. It's before he started making a name for himself as an actor, establishing himself. But yeah, he's cool. He's got that charismatic voice that he has. Roy Castle, he plays the irritating jazz prick well enough, you know. That, I'm assuming he was acting. I don't know, he might have been like that in real life. And Neil McCallum, yeah, I've seen him in other stuff. I can't think what though. I'm sure he played a policeman in something like a Bobby, but it's irrelevant at the moment. Yeah, as far as my favourite story from this, what's he? Oh, fucking dog. Excuse me. As far as my favourite story from this particular movie, I'd say it was the first one, the werewolf one, because it had such like I said, eeriness and atmosphere, and you know, the setting of like the mansion house in the, you know, the dark and dingy Hebrides, kind of away from civilization, so to speak, and also the story as well, and the twist at the end. Dug that. But I like all the stories in this. You know, like I said, the Amicus is the era of this film, 1965. This period, like, you know, mid-60s, mid-70s, this more the 70s, I guess, but this is where this film was leading to. And people might say that this movie's looks dated, shows its age, is hammy and all this other bullshit, and they're right to an extent, but I like that. I like being taken into another era. I like being removed from my surroundings by a film. I mean, that's one of the purposes of a movie, or anything really, any piece of art or literature, whatnot. And like I said, this one just absorbs you, takes you into that train carriage, and you know, it's just it's like a warm supernatural hug. But yeah, I love this movie. I love all the Amicus ones. I mean, this is like the least terrifying. Well, it's not even it's like the least scary, maybe, but it's the least least horrific of them. Maybe. Well, it's between this and the one that came after Torture Garden. They got increasingly more like darker and kind of bloodier, not bloodier, but more horrific as they progressed. But this one is where it all kicked off. I mean, all the stories were written by Milton Subotsky, who, along with Max Rosenberg, was the founder of Amicus Productions, and he based these stories on a 1945 supernatural supernatural anthology called Dead of Night, which is also a decent anthology. I mean, you know, it's a lot tamer than this, even, because, you know, 1945. But yeah, he wrote those stories. He was inspired to write an anthology based on seeing that, and it came to light eventually in 1964 and 1965. But yeah, it's a brilliant film. It's just got all the things that I love about like horror / supernatural type things. I mean, it doesn't have to be. It's not some dickhead jumping out of a door and going boo, you know, and it's not some arsehole running around chopping people up with an axe or whatever. And it's not. I mean, you know, supernatural films of today, mostly bullshit. I mean, there's no substance to them. There's no presence, and it's just like a in one ear out the other piece of fucking ectoplasm bullshit. I mean, there are some good horror films still being made, but maybe I think the best has been done. I mean, you know, 60s, 70s, 80s. I mean, they're all different eras and they've all got the different charms. And anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. Yeah, Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, it's fucking awesome. All the Amicus anthologies are fucking awesome. I don't think they can be repeated in terms of, say, if like someone did another horror anthology today. I mean, they still make out horror anthologies, of course. But they haven't got that same atmosphere, that same. It's not that. I can't put my finger on it. Just that same atmosphere, vibe, eeriness, creepiness, just otherworldliness that like kind of embraces you and fascinates you, or fascinates me, you know. But yeah, Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, it's good for what ails you. So, rock on.